The only reason she was born was for her father's sadistic experiments. He wanted to turn her into a superhuman. But all she wanted was a normal childhood. He wanted to create the only girl in the world. But she had to escape his sadistic behavior somehow. In 1936, Louis Didier was 34 and financially very well off when he came in contact with a minor who was struggling to feed his children. Louis had suggested that the minor entrust to him his youngest child Janine, who was only 6 years old. He then went on to educate her at boarding school with the condition that her family never saw her again. Didier's ultimate mission for Janine was that once grown up, she would give him a child as blonde as her, who would be raised away from any of the polluting influences of the outside world. On November 23, 1957, almost 22 years after Louis took on Janine, she had given birth to a blonde baby girl. 3 years later, Louis purchased a house between Lille and Dunkirk located in the north of France. He withdrew there so that the couple could simply devote themselves to carrying out his project of turning their child into this superhuman being. That child was Maud Julien. Julien's father was convinced that the mind could achieve anything and could overcome every trouble and conquer every obstacle. But to do this requires long and extremely rigorous training away from the impurities of this dirty world. Didier would tell Julien that she should never leave the house, even after he's gone from this world. Didier had reportedly believed that his daughter had been chosen as his protector. This is why he sought to indoctrinate her and simply make her withstand torment by making her participate in several cruel experiments. And this is why Julien was subjected to almost 18 years of controlling and manipulative behavior by her father, who was even an alcoholic and reportedly belonged to an esoteric lodge of Freemasonry, which believed in the occult. Once a month, Julien would even be locked overnight in a basement that was filled with rats. This was because her father would make her meditate about the end of life. There were even bells sewn into her sweater that would work as an alarm if she moved. Didier even forced her to drink whiskey just before making her walk in a straight line, which led to the liver damage that Julien lives with to this day. Most of these tasks are said to be in preparation for the impending troubles that her father was convinced would someday occur. And it would be when Julien would have to go undercover or escape. If that was not all, Didier even made Maud hold on to the electric fence that they had, and she wasn't allowed to let go until she could hold it without flinching. If Maud ever showed any emotions, the punishment would be no eye contact with her parents for almost 6 weeks. Didier, as he would tell it, was raised in a rather poor family with a father who beat him. But he then went on to join the resistance in Lille, France, during WW2 and, later, also owned the largest Peugeot car dealership in the city. Somewhere along the way, Didier even became a high-ranking member of the enigmatic fraternity of Freemasons. Whatever the psychological consequences of life and the oaths of a Mason might have been, Didier had emerged with a demented ideology all his own. As Julien grew older, she started testing her father's rules, like using 2 squares of lavatory paper instead of just 1, and even escaping from her bedroom at night for short walks around the house and garden. When none of these were discovered, her confidence began to grow. But it was actually her musical talent that offered her an escape. When Maud was 16, a new music teacher going by the name of Monsieur Moulin had arrived. He was kind, seemed to understand what was happening, and even persuaded Maud's father to let her visit his house for her lessons and then to work in his music shop, where she then met Richard. Maud's father then allowed her to marry Richard when she was only 18, provided she divorced him within 6 months and returned to look after him, which she did not do. Maud had only 1 child with Richard and another child from a subsequent relationship. Maud's escape from her personal hell was quite gradual and undramatic. She still went to visit her parents every week with the discomfort that never went away and simply being tormented by the guilt that she had abandoned them. The last time she saw her father was back in 1979, shortly before he passed away. All they did was sit in silence while her mother was still waiting on him in an outhouse that he had built. And the last time Maud saw her mother was about 10 years ago, and she still freezes every time they meet. Today, Maud is a psychotherapist specializing in child harm. It has been nearly 40 years since she left her childhood home, and for a long time, she wasn't even able to talk about her past to anyone. With her husband, Mark, Maud was able to catch up on her teens. And his mother was the very first woman to ever touch her lovingly. The simple gesture of placing an arm on Maud's shoulder made her cry as she felt so alive.